Hello, everybody. I am Michael Lomax, and I'm president and CEO of the United Negro College Fund, better known as UNCF, the nation's oldest and largest organization supporting America's historically Black colleges and universities, better known as HBCUs. And we've raised over $5 billion since 1944 when we were founded, and we've helped over 500,000 students earn college degrees. Today's Fireside Chat is focused on HBCUs and their production of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math graduates. We will focus on one exemplary, extraordinary, historically Black university grad who was a pioneering woman graduate in STEM and whose career at an HBCU, Tennessee State University, produced thousands of STEM graduates. Her name, Yvonne Young Clark, AKA YY. We'll learn why she was so well known as YY from this Fireside Chat. Our Fireside Chat is hosted on Handshake's platform because Handshake's mission is to open doors to careers for people who do not have privileged networks and connections so that they can have opportunities commensurate with their talents. Handshake enables them to start, jumpstart, and restart meaningful and rewarding careers. YY Clark did not have Handshake, but she is an example of how this used to get done in an earlier age. I'm excited to moderate today's Fireside Chat because HBCUs have played an outsized role in my own personal life and career. I first spent time on an HBCU campus 61 years ago when I spent 2 weeks living in Dorothy Hall on the Tuskegee Institute campus. That experience, being sheltered on the Tuskegee campus in the early days of the civil rights movement, was life-changing for me. It introduced me to and built my early relationship with HBCUs. I am an HBCU grad, Morehouse College. I taught for a decade at Spelman College, was president of HBCU Dillard University. And for the last 19 years, I have been the president and CEO of UNCF. I won't say I've done it all, but I can't figure out what else I'm supposed to do with HBCUs. And I have seen firsthand over those 61 years the power and impact of historically Black colleges and universities. The idea for this chat comes out of a podcast series, Lost Women of Science, which tells the remarkable stories of groundbreaking women working in STEM fields who never got the full recognition they deserved. Not until now. Season 3 of Lost Women of Science highlights Yvonne Young Clark, known as YY throughout her career, who was nicknamed the First Lady of Engineering because of her groundbreaking achievements as a Black female mechanical engineer. That's a mouthful, and that was a careerful. Season 3 of Lost Women of Science traces her trajectory from her unconventional childhood interest in fixing appliances, which I love, to her civil rights breakthrough in the segregated South of the 1950s. From her trailblazing role at Tennessee State University, a historically Black university in Nashville, to her work on moon rocks at NASA. This podcast series asks, what can YY teach us about what it means to be the first in a scientific field, especially as a Black woman in America? And this conversation expands that question to further ask, what does it take for students, particularly Black women STEM students to be successful in STEM and in industry today? To answer those questions, we have a really great group of, I hesitate to call them a panel, it's a little community here of leaders in the field. So let's get started, but let me just give a very quick introduction, and then we'll go one by one through them, hear from them, and then we'll have a conversation. Carol Sutton Lewis is the co-host and producer of Lost Women of Science, season 3. So she's the person who got us all started on this subject of YY Clark. Dr. Helen Gayle, and this is doctor with an MD, is the 11th president of Spelman College. And she has had an extraordinary career. Hope she's going to say a little bit about how she's had her STEM career and how she was able to pursue it. But she's here, and she's here today really as the president of one of the most extraordinary colleges in America that also happens to be an historically Black college, Spelman College. Dr. Chad Womack, Senior Director of National STEM Programs and Initiatives at the United Negro College Fund, and Aaliyah Goodman, Engineering Manager at Handshake, and an exemplar of a Black woman who has found her way to and through STEM and into the world of helping others, just like YY Clark. So let's begin with Carol. Carol, tell us a little bit about how you got started in the podcast world and what you do, and then how you found YY Clark, or how Lost Women of Science found you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thanks to everyone for being here today. My entry into the podcast world was a pandemic instance. I have another podcast, a parenting podcast called Ground Control Parenting, where I have conversations with parents who are raising Black children. And I was introduced to Lost Women of Science by some friends who were putting this project together and had heard my podcast and knew of my interest in storytelling, my interest in history, Black history, and asked me to join. And I was thrilled to do so because it was an opportunity to first be introduced to a Black American heroine who I'd never heard of. I mean, I thought I was really well-versed in a lot of Black American history, but I was delighted to hear of a woman I'd not heard of. It made sense. Lost Women of Science. They'd found someone who was not well known. And it enabled me to, it meshed so many of my interests. While I am not a graduate of a historically Black college or university, my father was a proud graduate of Tuskegee Institute, and all of my aunts and uncles on his side were HBCU grads. And so I grew up steeped in the tradition of HBCUs. And so I was really happy to be able to dive into the world and pay tribute to the wonderful work that they've done. And I also, having a background in parenting issues, I was really delighted to be able to tell the story of YY and her family. She has a very wonderfully well-educated, really supportive family that helped her through what was a very challenging path to engineering. So that's how I got to Lost Women of Science, and that's how we are all so happy to be able to bring this story to the world. It is overdue, and she is well deserving of all this attention.
You know, you have been really immersed in parenting in the contemporary environment. If you had the opportunity to interview YY as both an engineer and a mom, just say a little bit about her, because I got to tell you, hearing from her, when you hear her 2 adult children speak of her parenting, and you think about that career, I almost start crying. I mean, it is a deeply affecting and powerful narrative there.
So, Michael, what actually drew me to this story was the first thing I knew about her. YY was born in 1929 to a father who was a doctor and a mother who was a librarian and a journalist. To me, I instantly wanted to know more of that story and to tell it, because to be born in 1929 to 2 Black parents who were professionals was a story that I didn't think America heard enough of. And so, and as I dove into her family, she had this amazing family history. Her mother's side of the family were from Houston. Her mother's last name was Houston, and they were direct descendants from Joshua Houston, who was brought to Houston by Sam Houston. It's a really rich story. It has elements of Reconstruction, and it's so interesting to have this family story told. And the importance of that in terms of YY is that here she sprung from a family who was deeply invested in her pursuing her dreams. And so when she said at 9, when she fixed the family toaster and then fixed the boiler, and she became the mechanical engineer of her family. And she said to them, I want to be an engineer, at a time where that was pretty much unheard of for a young Black woman. Her family said, let's figure out what you need to do and let's figure out how you can do it. So the parenting style that she received growing up definitely influenced her. So when she had her 2 children, she was determined to do her work, to pursue her field, to pursue her profession. When she became a professor, it was a little easier because of the hours, but still her son Milton talks about when she was working for NASA, she would go away for summers and spend them in Huntsville, Alabama, and then Houston to work for NASA. And he missed his mom, but he understood completely that that's what she had to do. She has 2 adult children now who are so thrilled her story is being told. And it's such a testament to her parenting that all they want to do is tell the world how great a person she was, what a wonderful engineer she was, and a wonderful professor, and also a great role model as a mom.
So she's really a hidden figures, another one of the hidden figures who we don't know enough about. We learned about the NASA work that they did in the film and the book, but she's not one of those who is a part of that group. But she had a different career too. I mean, I just think maybe you could just say a little bit about this, because she did that and she was an educator.
Right. So when she graduated from Howard in 1951 as the first woman to graduate from Howard with a mechanical engineering degree and sought employment, she had a tough time. And therein lies how she became YY. Her name was Yvette Yvonne, but she went by Yvonne. But she couldn't get anybody to take her resume. And just her resume with no picture, because the name Yvonne, they didn't want to hire a woman. So at her father's suggestion, I believe, or perhaps it was her husband's suggestion because she married right after college, she put YY on her resume. So at least she could get through the door. And she had amazing stories of how the interviewers thought she was the secretary, or they never were actually interviewing for the job. And they were pretty bold in their discrimination in terms of, we can't use you. And it was interestingly, as much because she was a woman as she was a Black person. I mean, they were telling her she wasn't strong enough to do the work. They wouldn't want her to be the only woman in the group. She couldn't. So she was frustrated in their efforts. She did work for several companies. And then by virtue of moving to Nashville, she married, her husband was a professor at Meharry, and she moved and went to Tennessee State University figuring that they could use someone to teach. And so she became the first woman faculty member at Tennessee State University. And while she loved teaching, she did it for more than 50 years. She opened so many doors. Her children think that it was where she went because industry wasn't as accommodating. And she managed to satisfy her interest in moving forward in the engineering world by taking these summers as a professor. She had summers off and working in various areas, and working in many instances for NASA, and did groundbreaking work. I mean, she helped design the moon rock box that the astronauts used to pick up the samples, and she troubleshot a Saturn V rocket so that the mission could begin. So she managed to do it a lot and teach.
Yeah. So Helen Gayle, I mean, this is extraordinary, but I suspect in some ways it's not a unique story. And it's one that you heard repeated in your own career and the careers of Black women peers, but also now you're seeing it be a new narrative appearing, perhaps as a result of the work that's being done at Spelman College. So I ask you to testify.
All right. That song, I Just Want to Testify. Anyway, thanks. And thanks to both you, Michael and Carol, for getting us together. This is such an important topic. And, as you mentioned, my background is in medicine. In many ways, although I did not go to HBCU, I went to a women's liberal arts college that really had a really great track record in getting young women into medicine in the STEM field. And it was because of the advisor for health careers that I decided, that I could do it, because I did not go to college with the idea that I was going to be a doctor necessarily. And had not had a lot of examples that showed me that I could do it. And so just like so many people, I think it is the people in your lives who believe in you that can help to open up paths. And that's what I see at Spelman every day. There's no mystery in some ways to why Spelman is the #1 producer of Black women who go into STEM. It's because there has been for decades now women like Etta Faulkner, who was a real force in the mathematics field, who made it her business to open up that world to other young women and to chart the path and make sure that there was the academic rigor that allowed them to get into the kinds of schools that made their careers blossom. It was having research opportunities so people could get real world experience and understand what these STEM fields really look like. And giving opportunities, internships, summer programs. But I think also it is, again, it's back to this notion of believing that young Black women can do this. And I think, one of the things that has been so incredible about coming to Spelman is realizing how much just believing that young women can do it and setting that bar that says you really can achieve whatever you want to, I think is part of what the HBCU experience does in a way that, other schools don't, where oftentimes we're second guessed if we say we want to take on hard careers, or if people have not seen Black people in a particular field. At Spelman, just like, other HBCUs, people see the whole gamut of what is possible. And I think that's really our secret sauce in so many ways. And so I've been thrilled to see young women who are going into computer science and cybersecurity and mathematics and the biologic and natural sciences, mathematics, et cetera, all with having seen women who are doing it and with putting in the steps to make it possible. We also have programs that look at the pipeline. So starting in middle school, programs that allow people, young women, to be exposed to these careers at an early age. And, when you talk to a lot of the young women who are choosing STEM careers, they will say it was because of something, just like YY's children. It was something in my early days that got me excited about exploration and, the scientific endeavor. And I think, and I'll close and move on to some of the other panelists, but I think, part of what I think we also encourage at Spelman, like other schools, is that you don't necessarily have to have a STEM career. We know that STEM careers are in many ways, the careers of the future. There are more STEM jobs being created every day. But a lot of the rigor that goes into understanding the research endeavor, understanding math and science, that kind of analytic rigor will serve you well, whether you go into the arts, whether you go into the humanities, whether you go into the social science. So I think it's really more of a mindset than necessarily everyone needing to do a STEM career. But that STEM mindset is incredibly important for whatever career young people decide to choose.
I'm a living witness as a granddad to that early program. I want you to know that my granddaughter Bailey is a middle school student, and she'll go on to high school next fall. But she spent this part of her summer last summer on Spelman College at their math program, and just the sense of pride and accomplishment in it. I don't even know all of the details of the actual work that she did, but it was fun. It was exciting. It was challenging, and it boosted her sense of confidence and her focus on her future in ways that I don't think we could have anticipated. So I just want to say Spelman is doing it, and I know that and I would just say other institutions could do it, but we need more resources to be able to do that. That's been in part the work that you've been doing, Chad. I mean, you've been the evangelist inside UNCF for STEM. And if you would just say a little bit about what that work has entailed and what you've seen as a result of our ability to focus on STEM and to bring students from our institutions into opportunities that they weren't having a decade ago in this field.
Well, first, let me say thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts. Carol, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's a great honor to share virtual space with Dr. Helen Gayle and with you, Dr. Lomax, as well. I think this is a great conversation to have. And I think what Dr. Gayle was saying about STEM careers is important. It's not that everybody, needs to be a scientist or an engineer or what have you. Of course, we want our young folks to explore that space and see themselves in those career paths. But it really is about the academic rigor that STEM brings that can be applied across various academic domains. Let me first say that, when I was in high school, both of my parents graduated from the first HBCU, which was founded in my home city of Philadelphia, the Institute for Colored Youth, which became Cheney. So I grew up surrounded by Black teachers, actually from Cheney and Lincoln and so forth. And so for me, the HBCU experience was embedded within my childhood. And I didn't know, sorry, Dr. Lomax, close your ears when I say this. I didn't know that much about Morehouse, actually. So it wasn't until high school that the pastor of my church, who was a Morehouse grad, said, hey, you ought to consider this. But I knew I wanted to be a scientist. And this is the point. Dr. J.K. Haynes, who's still there, my mentor and teacher, called me on the phone and asked me a very simple question. He said, Chad, I hear that you want to become a scientist. And nobody had ever asked me that question. Nobody had ever bothered to really talk to me about what it meant to be a scientist. And the fact that he had reached out to me meant the world to me. So there I went from Philadelphia to Atlanta in 1984 to come down to campus, and the rest has been history. But I do think the environment that the Atlanta University Center provides is unique, but is emblematic of what HBCUs do every day, which is to provide a culturally competent and affirming environment in which Black students can thrive academically, but holistically as human beings. And you don't separate out being Black in this country versus being a STEM professional or learning about STEM careers. Those are intertwined together at HBCUs in such wonderful ways. And I think that's the special sauce that our schools provide. And it's just been a wonderful thing to witness and to experience.
Thank you, Chad. Just a little bit more about where you've been taking your programs and you've been, I think, both focused on what happens on the campus, but also how you link that to opportunities in the tech world in particular.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. Let's be clear, UNCF has heavily invested in the African American STEM pipeline with programs including the UNCF Merck Science Initiative, which actually predates my arrival into UNCF. The UMSI, the Science Initiative, was a $40 million investment by Merck in the life sciences and biomedical research at UNCF and supporting students at the undergraduate, graduate, and even the postgraduate levels. But also the Gates Millennium Scholars Program, while GMSP was not a STEM-focused program, about a third of the fellows, the GMSP program scholars and fellows, were STEM majors. And so over the 20 years that UNCF managed the Gates program as well as the Merck program, quite a bit of capital was invested, and we produced quite a few students who went on to succeed in various STEM domains. More recently, UNCF, we've expanded our programs to include programs in 3 different areas: IT tech or computer sciences, computer engineering, life sciences and biomedical research, and tech entrepreneurship. On the IT tech side, we have been working on the CS2 Tech Pathways Initiative, which is focused on building computer science education capacity at our HBCUs and supporting career development into the tech industry for our students and alumni. This includes the Tech Innovation Summit we've held for almost 10 years now in Silicon Valley, the HBCU CS Academy, and the Faculty Scholars in Residence program. All these programs are helping to build capacity at our schools, and we're very excited to continue that work with the Tech Hub, where we're trying to network and connect students with each other, tech professionals and tech companies. On the life science side, we have continued the great work that Dr. Jerry Bryant initiated at the UNCF back in the late 90s with the UNCF Merck initiative. We are thankful for the investment that Merck has made, but we're now continuing that legacy with the launch of the Ernest E. Just Life Science Initiative, named after Dr. Just, who was an African-American scientific pioneer ahead of his time. Dr. Just was also someone who was dedicated to building research capacity at HBCUs, most notably at Howard University. And in honor of his legacy and with support from Bristol Myers Squibb, the Genentech Foundation, and Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, we are supporting the development of African Americans in life sciences and biomedical research. We're building that pipeline at the undergraduate level at our schools, graduate students, and postdocs at and even the early career levels. Lastly, I would say that we're working closely with our HBCUs to establish biohubs that hopefully will build R&D capacity, that's research and development, with HBCU medical colleges such as Morehouse School of Medicine, to support a vibrant HBCU life science research ecosystem. So UNCF is doing quite a bit. And thank you to Dr. Lomax's leadership. We are able to leverage what UNCF resources can be brought to bear on this issue.
Thank you very much, Chad. One of the things that I learned when we were doing the Gates Millennium Scholars Program, which was 20,000 of the brightest students anywhere in the country who could go anywhere they wanted, and so many of the women went to Spelman on that program, and they were for not just Black, but Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, and Native American students. But I would talk to some of these really bright scholars every year when I met with them, and they would tell me stories of faculty members at their institutions, prestigious institutions all across this country, who would say to them, as they talked to them about what they want, the courses they wanted to take and the careers that they wanted to follow, but you may not really, and they would say, that may not really be a fit for you. So we are still seeing this, this sort of notion that STEM isn't for everybody. It's a privileged opportunity, and it's primarily not meant for people who are of color. It's not meant for women. So these obstacles that YY faced, and we're going to talk about how she challenged them, continue. And I'm wondering, Aaliyah, because you didn't attend an HBCU and you pursued a STEM degree, and you've had experience in the workforce, and now you are championing and opening doors for early career folks, women and men, minorities and others, at Handshake. Tell us a little bit about your experience and now the work that you get to do based on that experience.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be here and be on this panel with you all. I'm very honored. I started my career actually as a comp sci major, did that for 2 years at a college, and then I changed my major to design. The comp sci, I was actually really struggling a little bit with some of the programming languages. So I was like, let me change over to design because I also have a creative mind. So I have a left and a right brain. I also did an internship with IBM at that point. And then when I moved over to graphic design, I graduated and then came out and was a print designer. Well, that wasn't as fulfilling for me. And so then I went on to do freelance work. So I was building websites for friends and family and small businesses. And so that's how I actually got back into the STEM world. And so that actually stimulated my mind even more. So once I did that, I started to pursue a career in web development, and I was getting turned down, even though I had a lot of work to show. My portfolio was stacked. But I was getting turned down because people were saying, well, you don't have the experience, you haven't had the title, all kind of different, reasons why. But it only takes one person to say yes. And so once I did step into that position, I continued to move up. And I went into multimedia development. I went into software engineering, became a senior engineer, became a lead engineer, and then I became a principal engineer. And it's because I didn't let anybody deter me or tell me no, or, even though other people were trying to block me, even people that were considered, my colleague friends, I just kept going. And one thing that really stuck with me and kind of was a switch for me was when my boss told me, you don't need a title or you don't need permission to lead. And then once that sunk in with me, I soared. I was thriving because then I became myself. And then I was able to shine. And then I was able to say, okay, let me actually produce product and see what other engineers are doing, and then help other engineers. Not only just engineers, but also other people in that community, technically and through software. So once people actually saw that, then I was able to actually, actually move up in my career. So it's more about my mindset had to change. I was always in the fight. And then once I chose to change my mindset, the scope and scalability change of things around me. I was actually affecting product and software and people around me. I was actually helping other engineers grow. And that was part of the work that I was really, excited about. Then once I moved on from principal engineer to engineering manager, that was only a few months ago, I was still getting pushback because people were saying, well, haven't had the engineering manager position, even though I was leading major teams and leading major projects at that time. So my resume was stacked with skills that were transferable to management, but I was still getting no, because I didn't have that title. But like I said, it only takes one person to say yes. And then now, so I'm at Handshake, I'm an engineering manager. And right now I love my job because I'm able to actually influence and encourage other engineers and actually carve a path for them so that they don't have to go through everything that I went through.
Do you think there's a penalty for being a Black woman in engineering? Because, so much of what we hear today is that you don't need a degree. You need the skill, you need the experience, you need and certainly in tech, you need to be able to demonstrate competency. And you obviously were demonstrating a lot of competency there and mastery, but you were also getting pushback. How much of that was really related to your race and gender, do you think?
I think a lot of it was, growing up the ranks, I was the only female, let alone Black female. And that plays a lot, into it because, there's racism, sexism, and just simply ego. I mean, ego plays a lot into it, where somebody doesn't want to see you do more than them. And so, yes, I think it definitely plays a lot, because otherwise I feel like there's a lot of us that have the skills, that have the, the know-how to actually be in these spaces, but we're not. My last position was the only job where I was able to see other female engineers.
Yeah. So, let's really broaden outside of our personal experiences and the work that we do individually, and sort of ask some bigger questions, particularly as we focus on women of color in STEM disciplines. Helene, is there still a disconnect between competency and mastery and opportunity for women of color in STEM?
Absolutely. And, I think that, again, this idea of seeing examples and people getting past their biases. I think we are used to thinking about engineers as white men. We're used to thinking about people in the tech field as, Silicon Valley bros. We have these images in our minds. And, as we start producing more and more young people of color who are in STEM fields across the board, those barriers are still going to be there. And I think that they are inherent barriers. You mentioned privilege as kind of privileged careers. I think that there's still this notion that these careers are the creme de la creme. And when we are, as a society, used to seeing anything that is the creme de la creme reserved for a certain group of people, it is hard to break through that. And so I think this is a systemic issue. I think all of us are doing what we can to chip away at it, but it really is very real and it exists. And it is in the, fact that if a young Black person expresses a desire to be an engineer or a computer scientist, they're often not encouraged in the same way. If they don't have a parent who came from that background, if they didn't come from a school that everyone recognizes, they are often just sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly discouraged from taking that next step. So I do think, the work that all of us are doing collectively is important for continuing to break through the stereotypes that then get acted upon, that then create the barriers for our young people having access to these very important careers.
So, we could have another conversation and have people who represent the employer community, who we deal with at a very high level, I might add, and we say our students are. And I was in a session with 10 HBCU presidents and the CEO of one of the largest tech companies. And that president, Ruth Simmons, who is in the room now, Ruth has been the president of Brown University, and now she's at Prairie View. And she said, we have talent. They are prepared, but we keep getting told that we don't have the talent. Our talent isn't as good as the talent that the hiring people expect. So at some point, we have to change the culture inside the companies. This panel today is not one that can do that. Our focus is largely, well, maybe Aaliyah does a little bit more of that. She's dealing with, but I'm curious about what we can do internally in the communities to reinforce the armor building that you have to get at the same time that you're getting competent and mastery of the discipline. You also have to build a psychological armor that enables you to fight this battle. Chad, you've been dealing. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just two other things. First of all, I do think we have a window of opportunity here. There is this moment, as we all know, and it's a moment that may be slipping away, but where there is an emphasis and where there is an openness. And so I think that we've got to figure out how we keep that momentum and use this moment to kind of get through doors that have been closed. I think the other piece that you mentioned, and this is what you do every day, Michael, is resources. Because, it is hard to compete when you don't necessarily have the same laboratories that a research institution may have, so that you're on the papers of scientists that people recognize and names that people recognize. So I do think we need to keep thinking about how do we have the resources to build the kind of infrastructure that we need as institutions to compete. And then how do we do some of the partnering? Because, I think all of us have had examples where, now that schools, large research institutions have appreciated, at least, conceptually, that diversity is important and diversity pipeline, there are very important partnerships that are now developing between HBCUs and major research institutions. And I think that's a strategy that we have to keep leaning into, because we're not going to necessarily create all of the equivalent resources, but we can do things that allow our students to have those opportunities, get the rich believe in you opportunity at an HBCU, and then use that at some of the research institutions that will allow them to broaden their careers.
Well, that's really terrific counsel. Chad, let's follow up on this moment of opportunity with the employer side of this, because you're dealing a lot, but you're doing at the work you're doing at UNCF, you are working with some major research institutions about partnerships. And Helen has referenced, but you're also you're telling me we've got some new opportunities with corporate America. What are you seeing? Is the door still open?
It is. And I want to lean into what Dr. Gayle said, which I think is extremely important to understand. If we're going to move our institutions and into a more competitive space, where when I say competitive, I mean for research grants and dollars and support that allows our institutions to create the environment where our faculty and our students can compete and participate at the cutting edge, which I do think we can and have been with limited resources, then we're going to need four things. One, so it's the 3 R's: rigor, relevance, and relationships, which is the old school framework for education, but I think is relevant today. Rigor meaning academic rigor, but also preparing young folks for careers. Relevance meaning making sure that our curriculums are relevant, aligned with tech industry. And then relationships, which is what you're referring to, Dr. Lomax, with regards to our partnerships with tier 1 research institutions around the country and also tech industry stakeholders. But I would add one more thing, which is love. We really have to operate out of the love ethic that we care about. I know it sounds strange for a scientist to talk about love, but it is. It's really about wrapping our arms and our hearts around our young folks and letting them know that we care and that we're concerned about their future. I think that matters. I certainly experienced that, not just from my family, but from the HBCU family. I don't think I would be where I am today if it weren't for the love and concern that the HBCU faculty at Morehouse and Spelman and Clark Atlanta University shared with me as a student when I was there in the mid 80s. So I think those are the things that I think about as we design programs, initiatives, and engage our campuses.
Carol, I want to come back to you because I loved in your self-introduction, you talked about storytelling, and Helen Gayle's predecessor, Mary Schmidt Campbell, used to take me to task all of the time about the narrative about HBCUs. Tell the story, tell a different story. I think you told in some ways an old story about in YY Clark, but there are a lot of elements of a new story about missed opportunities, potential missed opportunities for corporate America, for our space program, and others, if they didn't really identify this talent and bring that talent into the fold. How can storytelling, because you do this all the time, how might we think about storytelling as an enabler of this strategy, which Dr. Gayle is helping us craft here for the moment?
Well, thanks for that question, Michael, because Dr. Lomax, excuse me, because we're all here today because of a story that's been told about YY Clark. Her story has been brought to light. I mean, you're right. It's an old story, but it has very, very present and future implications. We are telling the story of a woman who faced discrimination on two fronts, which this discrimination still exists today. And through telling her story, we hope to provide inspiration for students and inspiration for employers as they think about the student bodies that they're going to be hiring. I want to go back. You had asked the question about sort of psychologically how we arm our students now to deal with this persistent discrimination. And while Dr. Womack, I would agree that love is important and critical. I would also say there is a tough love because one of the tough love that's necessary, because one of the things that as I dove into YY's story, the thing that kept hitting me in the face was her doggedness, the fact that she did not take any of these clear acts of discrimination personally. Her mantra was, "This is not my problem." When a classic, and I'll give this very quick example, she was the first Black woman to join SWE, the Society for Women Engineers. They had a conference in Houston after being assured by the hotel that everyone would be welcome because the hotel knew they had a Black member. When she appeared with her registration, the hotel refused to allow her to stay there because they didn't accept Negroes at the time. Now, SWE was horrified and offered and wanted to move the convention, but YY said, "This is ridiculous. It takes so much effort. We can't just pick up this convention and move it. There's got to be another way." They negotiated that YY could use the front entrance. She had to stay elsewhere, but she could use the front entrance. Anytime that she left the conference, though, she had to be accompanied by a white member so that the hotel guests weren't concerned about this Black woman roaming their halls. Well, many people would have commanded that the NAACP show up in front of the hotel, would have shut it down, would have felt that that was the way to protest. YY instead tells that story from the vantage point of, we had a great time. We would take as many smoke breaks, snack breaks as possible, and I would walk all around the hotel. I spent a lot of time, everybody wanted to take me out to walk around. And she's like, she got what she was there for, which was the conference. She got to flaunt the hotel's sort of a settlement in their faces because she said, "I was always up and we were always walking around the hotel." And she accepted, she had relatives in Houston. She accepted that this is what she had to do to get where she wanted to go. And that has been persistent through her career, not turn the other cheek and go in a different direction because you're being moved in that direction, but the armor around her, which was born of love and born of support and born of the knowledge that this was not, the rejection of her was not the rejection of her mind or ability. It was the problem of the people doing the rejecting. And to the extent that that still exists, it's really important that we help our students understand that this stuff is hard and you're going to be challenged by it, just the work itself. And then you're going to be challenged by trying to make your way in the world where in some places they're not looking for you. So to the extent that you can sort of keep going, sort of dogged determination that story needs to be told now just as much as it needed to be told in YY's time. And through this kind of storytelling, hopefully more people will be able to hear it.
That's wonderful. And we're about to close out, and I may not be able to get back to every one of you, but I want to come to certainly give you a last word, Aaliyah, because it's the Handshake platform, which is allowing us to speak to hundreds of thousands, dare I say millions of both students, employers, and academic institutions. What's your message to them about change and opportunity that Handshake is trying to create? What could they do differently? And you don't have to choose all of them, just one big idea.
One of the great things I love about Handshake is, and the reason why I said yes to come on board was because they're actually looking at the problem. And that's one of the things that I like to do as an engineer is look at problems. You don't always have to have the solution, but you actually have to be conscious about what the problems are. And that's what Handshake does. I think that, for so many years, we have kind of avoided and, not wanted to talk about, not the issues of, racism and, not being able to hire Black and African Americans, as well as, female engineers. But Handshake is actually taking it by the, hands and saying, we're actually going to go right into the fire and look at hiring and make opportunities available for underrepresented groups, including Black female engineers. And so one of the things that we're doing is partnering up with and collaborating with different organizations and saying that we know, as some of the surveys have come back, that female engineers and Black engineers are really having a good success with virtual career opportunities and matching up employers to students through virtual events. So Handshake is doing more of those to actually get a more collaborative communication and collaborative interviews with employers to make sure they're in front of each other.
Well, I hope one of the things you're going to do is use this fireside chat to help educate more employers and more institutions that aren't HBCUs. The non-HBCU institutions should be partnering with HBCUs. The companies should really examine their own cultures and practices. Look in that mirror and say, what can we do differently to take advantage of the Clarks that are out there that we haven't seen? And then I hope that we'll also have other opportunities to see some of the extraordinary work of Carol Sutton Lewis, telling stories that are untold stories. Because I think we want love, we want tough love, but we also want inspiration. And I'm going to tell you, there's nothing like a great story to inspire you. And I will say, if you haven't seen her Clark story on Lost Women of Science, listen to it. It's a 40-some minute podcast. Listen to it because it is a beautiful, beautiful story. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you to Handshake for hosting us. I look forward to doing more of these, and I hope our audience has been as inspired by these wonderful 4 extraordinary individuals, just as I have been. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.